Yay, awesome. So welcome everyone to Let's End It, the educational series we are putting on along with Everyone Free. It is National Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month, January, and we wanted to put something together just to spread awareness in the community, bring people together, and just have a conversation. This is a presentation, but a lot of my presentations I've noticed, like especially human trafficking, tend to turn into discussions. I am not an expert. I am in this work, but I'm always a learner. And so if you guys have questions and are interested in something, please go ahead and ask. I will try my best to answer it, but this is a presentation, but I really want it to be a dialogue. I want it to be a conversation to be had amongst everyone. But with that being said, my name is Rebecca Soon. I am an outreach specialist at Project Sister Family Services. We are the local rape crisis center here in Pomona, and we are on the newly founded Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force with the amazing Everyone Free. Maybe you heard about this educational series through them, but this is what we're doing, and we've been doing it since March. So we've helped at least 5 survivors of human trafficking since March, since it was started. And we've loved working with Everyone Free and Pomona Police. So that's a little bit about myself. And I will go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we will go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about Human Trafficking 101. Human trafficking is it's a very large and broad subject, and it's different depending on where you live. So today we're just going to learn about the basics almost. And because we could talk about this all day. There are specific like subgroups of trafficking that we can sit and talk about, but today we're just going to be talking about sex trafficking and labor trafficking and what goes into someone being trafficked. But just a little bit about Project Sister Family Services, just what I do and what we're about. So we are the local rape crisis center, as I said before. We have a 24-hour hotline that services victims of sexual assault, sexual violence of any form. And our 24-hour hotline is backed by 40 different advocates that have been trained, and they're on that hotline 24/7 for crisis intervention and accompaniment services. So we can go to the hospitals and accompany someone who has been sexually assaulted to get a forensic exam. So we do that, and we also go to police stations. Say if a survivor needs that support in order to report a specific instance that happened to them, we are able to accompany them, and so that's what the hotline is for. And then we also have free counseling for anyone who has experienced any type of sexual violence or any family member who has had a family member that has been a victim. And so we know that families are affected by their family members who have been who are survivors. So we service that population, and we also service any child who has been abused in any type of way. Whether that's sexual, emotional, physical, and then we do bullying also. So all of our counseling is free, and we have professional therapists, we have interns, and we have licensed therapists in our office, which is great. And then we have outreach services, which is what I do. I go around and I teach people things that make them uncomfortable, which is great for me. We teach about sexual violence. We teach about healthy relationships. We teach about sexual assault, sexual harassment, and within the past 3 years, we have taken on this human trafficking portion. And so we go out, we teach. We also have a group specifically for youth called Pomona Youth Prevention Council, called PYPC, and we do a lot of work with them and within the prevention area, and they love it. They actually just got this presentation today, so it was great. So it prepped me for tonight, so I'm excited. So that's just a little bit about Project Sister Family Services. And we can, yes, Lynn?
I have a question, sorry.
Absolutely.
If you get a phone call, do you go and pick up a victim?
We, for sexual assault, no.
Yes. Okay.
So when we get phone calls, it's either by the police officer that is needing in the company, like we need to go and accompany them, or by the nurse at a hospital if the survivor is requesting an advocate. So we don't do like transportation, but but for human trafficking, we do respond.
Okay, I did a 40-hour course with Open Door.
Okay.
In San Bernardino, and they
Okay.
offer courses. Well, they did before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I asked the question.
Okay.
Because I'll also go and pick up the trafficking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So we haven't. So we do like Uber. So if someone needs to be transported to maybe like a shelter or something like that,
right?
We can do that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Specifically for human trafficking, though, for the sexual assault,
correct.
It's through like the police station or the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Cool. So let's go ahead and get started. And I kind of want to just start with something in the chat. So awesome. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. They're great too. Yeah. So I just wanted to get your thoughts kind of started, your gears started in your mind. When you think about, and you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. When you think about slavery, what comes to your mind? What words come in? What pictures come in when you think about slavery? Hostage, being held hostage. Mm-hmm. Somebody being held against their will. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Against a person's will. Thank you, Jacqueline and Marlena. Oops. Selling people. Mm-hmm. I didn't mean to skip the slide, but yes. So I like to start out with getting your brains thinking about slavery, because for me, growing up, I grew up in Virginia, so we learned about the transatlantic slave trade. We learned about colonization and everything. So when I think about slavery, before I was in this work, I thought it's over. It happened a long time ago, and this was whenever people owned slaves, and this was in the 1500s, and this is whenever the United States was first being colonized, and it was kind of a normal sight to see, and it was normalized that people who owned land owned slaves, and they had slave houses, and it was just something that you saw all the time. And so it's easy to think, oh, that doesn't happen anymore. And so when you think about slavery, you think about slaves just out in the open, right? And then when we think about slavery, we think about the Emancipation Proclamation. We think about Abraham Lincoln, who ended slavery, people shall be free. And we were like, okay, great. We are moving forward. Slavery is no longer a thing. And that was in 1863. But we fast forward to now. We fast forward to 2021, which is crazy that we're in 2021. But 2021 modern day slavery looks like this. Does anybody have any comment on any of these pictures? And if they are familiar with why are these pictures associated with modern day slavery? Any picture?
Well, the little girl, the bottom left-hand corner looks like she's begging.
Yes.
And so in many parts of the world, and even here in the US, children and adults are forced into begging. So it's a form of slavery.
Yeah. Thanks, Tamiko. The modern day struggle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we'll go into that a little bit. People are in need and they're struggling and they need money. And so a lot of traffickers, this is the way that they do it, is they see that there is a need in someone's life. Someone is vulnerable, someone needs a job. And so they will trick them into believing that they are going to get a good job. They're going to be paid. They're going to have shelter. They're going to have everything that they need. But then they get somewhere and they do get hired and it's nothing that they thought it would be. And so you see it a lot with the begging and and then in construction, even in hospitality, health and beauty, nail salons. You see it a lot in agriculture. And we'll go into those a little bit also. And just the hard labor slavery. We call it modern day slavery. And the reason why it's modern day is that we don't see it. It's not as obvious as when we think about our history books and we see the slaves in the crops. We see all of that. So it's different now. It's different in 2021, and there's actually more slaves in slavery right now than there was in the 1500s because it's just so easy now. So human trafficking, the actual definition, it's the uses of force, fraud, or coercion. So those three terms are really, really important to remember when talking about human trafficking. So it's the uses of force, fraud, or coercion to control another person for the purpose of engaging in commercial sex acts or soliciting labor or services against his or her will. So that is the definition of human trafficking. And it's important to know that this affects every state in the United States, and it's global. And there was a really good question, I think by Vinci. Vinci had emailed me and asked me a question to talk about how human trafficking is portrayed in the media. And so I will address that. And it's important to know that it's not global. It's not just global, and the media will make that kind of sensationalized that it only happens in the third world countries and it only happens somewhere other than the US. But it's important to know that it happens right in our backyard, and it happens in Pomona, specifically Holt, the corridor in Holt Avenue, that area. And it's important to know that it's happening now, and it's happening in families, and it's happening under our noses. And so when we think about human trafficking, we want to talk about the what and the how and the why. How do these traffickers do what they do, and why do they do it? And so when we think about that, we want to talk about the AMP model. And so the AMP model is action, means, and purpose. So action. So what are they actually doing? So there's 4 things that are involved. So it's recruiting, harboring, transporting, and providing. So a trafficker can be involved in all of this. A trafficker can be involved in just one part. So a trafficker could be recruiting. They could be trying to enlist someone, trying to, hey, we're hiring, we have this amazing job. A lot of the times it can be like a modeling agency, acting agency, or it could be a nannying job. It could be, hey, I have a really, really good family that it pays really well. You'll have food, you'll have shelter. All you have to do is take care of the family. But say they get there and say they don't speak the greatest English either. But they just need a good job here in America. Or like they've lived here and they just need a good job and they don't speak English, but they don't speak good English and somebody is saying like, I can help you. And they didn't understand that this is actually going to be a lie. But that is the way that they recruit, is they lie, they make something seem very, very great, and it's not. Ooh, there's other people coming in. Welcome, people who are coming in. So a person can be involved in recruiting, harboring, so they can give a home or shelter to. So a person can just be the place where they keep the people, just like Amazon or any type of production in industrial building. They keep their product somewhere so that whenever there is a demand, they can go back to that place and get the product. Same thing, but with humans. And then they transport them. They buy them an airplane ticket. They're the ones that accompany them to go wherever the demand is. And then you can be involved in the providing, so making available for the use. So doing the business deal, getting that person over, and getting them to work for free. Any questions on action? Action of the AMP model. Awesome. So going to M, the means. How do they do this? The 3 terms that I said that were very important to remember is force, fraud, and coercion. Now, these three means are different, and they could be involved. It could just be forcing someone. So say somebody is being trafficked and the only way they were trafficked was by force. So they were just physically assaulted or something like that. But most of the cases that you will see, all of these were being done to the survivor. So force, fraud, and coercion. So when I try to explain all three of these, sometimes I'm like, this could, coercion could also be force, and fraud could also be coercion. And so it's important to know that, like, the reason why it is so hard to get a victim or a survivor out of something like this is because most of the time, all three of these means are happening to them. So they're being forced, they're being manipulated, they're being lied to, they're being sold by their family. Like, there's so much involved in someone being trafficked. And so it's not just one of these. And I think this is important part to bring up about why a lot of people don't come forward about human trafficking is because a lot of people will victim blame. And the reason why people will victim blame, meaning they will blame the victim for getting into something like this, right? But people don't understand that they were lied to. People don't understand that they were manipulated. People don't understand that their money is being held against them or their families are in danger. Lynn, yes?
That's what I was going to say, because what they do, especially with the younger people, they take them in and tell them how much they love them and how much they're going to take care of them. And then the person tells them so much about their family. And then if they want out, then they say, well, I might have to go pay grandma a visit, because
Exactly.
they have all the information. So they're threatening their family. It's like so true.
Absolutely.
And that's why they stay in.
Exactly. It's a cycle. It's like, it's hard to get out. And so it's important. So yeah, thank you, Lynn. It's important to be like, hey, there's many more factors coming into play rather than someone just leaving something.
Right.
And it can also come into the form of a relationship. Say a young person is seeking support and love and say that they're from the foster care system or they're homeless.
And they prey on that. They prey on that.
Exactly.
And they prey on, they go to schools and they watch the kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why the average, average age of entry into this sex trafficking industry is 12 years old.
And the amazing part is you like age out in your 20s.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's horrible.
It's they age out, but they're still being manipulated.
Right.
They're still in that, they're still 12 years old.
Because they have different positions then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much, Lynn.
Sorry.
No, thank you. No, like I said, this is a conversation. It's really important to know that how many factors are actually at play. And it's really heartbreaking to think about, especially with children. We have a whole other presentation that we do about the commercial sexual exploitation of children. And it's all of these are huge factors in that. And so lastly, the P in the AMP model is, so what's the purpose? Why are they doing this? Two things: commercial sex acts and labor and services. And I put a little bullet under labor and services because it is unique in that people uninvolved in this trafficking benefit from the services. So we think about agriculture, we think about health and beauty, we think about hospitality. These people who are working for free and who are being enslaved, the community benefits from it. And that's something to think about, when, and I try not to think about it when I go to the grocery store and get my produce, but you think and you hope that the people who gave us, the ability to get this produce at the grocery store were able to be paid, because a lot of it, we can find a lot of trafficking within agriculture. So that is the AMP model. Any questions on the AMP model? Awesome. So let's go to types of human trafficking. We're going to talk about the two types. So the first one is sex trafficking. And this is the one that everyone free And us, Project Sister, and the Pomona Police Department, we have been working against. And so sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing. So all those things, anything that has to do with all of those terms, soliciting, advertising of a person for a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by those three terms we talked about: force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained 18. So that is in italics because a lot of people are in the industry of sex work. Some people choose to do it. I would say most do not. But adults who are in the sex work industry can be there by choice. But we call it sex trafficking with minors who are not 18 years of age yet. So if they are a person that is induced to perform this type of commercial sex act and they are less than 18, they are considered to be C-sex, so commercially sexually exploited child. And then commercial sex act is any sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. So we know what commercial goods are, anything dealing with buying or selling goods. And so there's three people involved in a commercial sex act. So it is the trafficker, it is the victim, and it is the buyer. And so that's what makes it commercial, is that there's a product, there's a host who has the product, and someone is buying the product. And where does this happen? And this is where I will answer Vincey's question in just a little bit about the media. So it happens everywhere. It happens in hotels and motels. It specifically happens on the internet. And this is a really important place to kind of talk about this, especially with children, especially with youth, and it being a pandemic. It's very important to be very cautious about the internet, because a lot of traffickers will create fake Instagrams and Facebooks and just talk to kids. And even gamers will, it's common to have kids on live, whether that's Call of Duty or League or whatever they play, to meet people. And that is a place where traffickers like to be, because it's where the kids are, and kids are vulnerable. They're not naive because they're naive, they're kids. So they're going to trust people a little bit easier. And so a lot of people will create these fake profiles and say, hey, we have this great agency, do you need summer work? And then they start asking the personal questions, and maybe they start, having a friendship, and then it becomes into a relationship. And so these traffickers know what they're doing within social media. It happens in the streets. It happens in pornography, which surprises some people, because some people just think that people choose to be there, which a lot of people do choose to do sex work in the porn industry. But there are a lot of those people who are forced to be on screen. And what's so scary about pornography is that you don't know what is on the screen. Is it consensual? Are those people, do they want to be there? Do they want to be doing this? And so that's where pornography can get, there's a gray area and dangerous. It happens in escorting and prostitution. And then family, which is, a lot of people don't know this either, but there are families who normalize human trafficking. They, it's normal to them. They sell their children. And actually, I was watching an interview about a girl who was sold until she was 17, 18, and she thought it was normal. It was normal for her family to do that. And it happens in relationships, like I said. People who prey on younger people, or people who just prey on those vulnerable people who don't have a home, don't have love, don't have support. Starts out good, and then it ends really bad. And then truck stops and bars and clubs. And then I want to answer Vincey's question. So she asked me, does the media portray human trafficking well? And I would say that sometimes it does, and sometimes it does not. And whenever we talk about like the familial pimping and just when we talk about the coercion and the fraud and the force, and there's so many factors that play into it, right? The media doesn't really talk about that. The media doesn't talk about all that goes into someone's life and how they got to where they were. And so what the media likes to do, they like to sensationalize a story. But then they don't talk about actually what's going on and how is this happening. They don't follow up with 12 is the average age of people who get into sex trafficking, and this is why. It's because foster care system, homeless youth, all of that. The media likes to sensationalize things and likes to be, wow, like this is a crazy story. Come listen to this. And they kind of capitalize off of someone's trauma. And it is really great to have survivors talk about their story, right? But it's whenever the media sort of takes over and sort of just, like I said, capitalizes off of their story and off of their trauma. And then one other thing that we've seen the media do is they've called people who were like children who were in this, were sex trafficked, they call them underage prostitutes. And so verbiage like that used through the media is very, very dangerous, because then victim blaming, and then people are like, well, they shouldn't have been in that situation, or they wanted to be there. No, any child that is caught up in this is a victim. They're never to be blamed. And so I hope that answers your question, Vincy. Social media, the media is good sometimes, and it's great to share resources and it's great to share education. But it becomes a different story when people are just like exploited and kind of just treated as like, this is just a story. We tend to just sensationalize, oh my gosh, and then we don't talk about it anymore. Yeah, language is so important, for sure. And then I wanted to have us watch a video about a girl who's telling her story. And she talks about some of the things that I touched on how it can be normalized. Let me know if you guys can hear this. Can you hear it?
No.
No? Just a sec. Haha, that's why. All right.
12 years old and you're living with...
Can you guys hear it now?
You know, you're 12 years old and you're living with your mom.
It's going in and out.
Mom's just struggling because she didn't think that life was really going to work out like this for her, and she doesn't have a man around, and the men that are around haven't always been that great. Sexual abuse is becoming kind of normal for you, and you think that other people don't have secrets that are as bad as you, and maybe you've tried to talk to somebody at school and they haven't really heard you, or maybe they just haven't had time to listen to you. And so you're seeing these girls on the videos, and they're so pretty and they're so sexy, and so your way at 12 of escaping into this fantasy world is to think about what it must be like to be one of these girls, and you know that adult men already look at you, and you wonder how you can kind of use that.
I was just a child, and that's how I was supposed to live, like a child, like an adult.
So one day you're coming out of school and there's a guy outside in a Cadillac, and he's nice looking. I mean, he's got the baseball cap and the jeans and the Timbs, and he tells you how pretty you are, and you know how pretty your hair looks, and it's been a while since anybody even really noticed anything about you. And for the first time, you feel like somebody's really interested in you, because now all of a sudden he's asking you about your dreams and your hopes and where your father's at, and he says that he can be a daddy to you.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
And so that night he takes you to a club and he puts you up on the stage and he gives you a few drinks and there's men throwing dollars at you and it's scary, but all the time you're just looking at his face in the back of the room and he's like, you know, go ahead baby girl, go ahead, you're doing it for daddy. And you're feeling proud because nobody's ever said that to you. And so then that night he tells you that there's more stuff that you've got to do, and he takes you into a room and there's a man there and he tells you to strip and you think this is something you'll never do, and yet there's a part of you that already knew how to do this because that's what your stepfather's been doing to you all these years before. And so you turn that trick and it's like a part of you has died inside. And so you come out of the club that night and you get in the car and you know he's pumping 50 cents and he takes you to McDonald's and he tells you, you did a good job tonight, sweetie. And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that he made. And right now, you're happy.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was dependent on for support.
You feel like this is the best that it's ever gonna get, and everything else in your life has prepared you for this moment. All the sexual abuse, or the neglect, or the drama, or the pain, or the trauma has prepared you for tonight, where you stepped across a line that you always thought you'd never really quite step across. And you don't realize that night what it'll be like to be on the track and get raped. And you don't realize that daddy isn't really gonna protect you. You don't realize what it's like to have a gun held to your head that night. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you catch your first STD. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you first come home and daddy beats you for the first time because you didn't make enough money. You don't know what it's going to be like to have cops offer to trade sex with you in exchange for not being arrested. And then sometimes you'll do that and they'll still lock you up anyway. You don't know what it's like to sit up in jail and know that you just made $1,500 for your pimp last night, but he won't come down and put $200 bail on just to get you out a few days early. You don't know what it's like to walk down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're just getting off work and people are starting their day and they see you and they know what you do and they look at you in a way that you just don't feel like you belong in that world anymore. And you don't know what it's like to feel like you've lost part of yourself along the way and to feel like you'll never leave. And no matter how many times you try to leave, he'll always find you and catch you. But that night, all you care about is the fact you're riding in the Cadillac and you're eating McDonald's and you're listening to 50 and you got this one man who you really think loves you sitting right by your side.
So she went through a lot. And going back to Vincey's question, the media won't portray that. They won't tell you that. It doesn't just happen. Human trafficking doesn't just happen. People don't just get into this. There's a lot more that goes on. There's abuse, there's manipulation, there's just so much. And then this seems like it happened in New York, and the media also won't tell you that. I mean, it's not just a third world country thing. It happens here. Any thoughts on that video? I every time I watch that video, I've watched it so many times, but still gets me. Any comments or questions? Alrighty. And so just a little bit more on specifically sex trafficking. I wanted to bring up two relevant people that have crazy stories. And then Centoya is out of her story. She's out of jail, all of that, but Zephaniah we'll talk about. But Centoya, she was charged as an adult because she was 16 when she was charged for murder for killing her trafficker. And whenever I talked earlier about how language is so important, and seeing children as victims rather than an underage prostitute, because it sounds like they want to be there. So Centoya, she's actually out of jail now, but she spent 15 years in jail because they tried her as an adult for killing her trafficker when somebody should have been there and said, no, hey, she was abused, she was manipulated into doing something like this, and she is a victim. But she has a documentary on Netflix. You can check it out. Her story is amazing, and now she has a book out, and she's doing great. And then right now, actually, there is a girl from Texas that is on trials right now for being involved in a murder with her trafficker and another person. And she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I'm pretty sure her trafficker was the one who killed someone. I don't know everything, but I know she's 17 right now. And people, even actresses, are reaching out to the DA and saying, do not try her as an adult. She is a victim. She's a child. And so this is just like real life examples of how trafficking can affect children and can affect the lives of people. Any questions on sex trafficking? That is the end of sex trafficking specifically. Alrighty. And so our second form of human trafficking is forced labor. And so it's the same thing. So recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor services through those three things. So force, fraud, and coercion, for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. And I would say slavery is just all of that. And so you'll see it in involuntary domestic servitude, meaning like nannying for a family without being paid and without being fed sometimes. And then agriculture, restaurants, peddling and begging, like the picture we saw at the beginning. We see that. I saw that when I went to Mexico. My first time actually experiencing that was when we were at the border about to leave, come back to California. There were a couple kids that were going up to cars, and I was told that parents actually pull their kids out of school to beg for money. And that's basically trafficking your child. And they just do that. That's how they make their money. And so it's normal to the child. So that was my first experience with that. And then you can see it in construction and health and beauty. And so I put pictures of an agriculture worker and then a nail salon, because sometimes those will be founded to be a place for human trafficking, and people are not being paid and they're not being treated well. Any thoughts on human trafficking for forced labor? And a lot of the times people will be held against their will because they owe a certain family a certain amount of money. And so until they work without pay that is equivalent to what they owe them, they will be a slave for that long. And
Or they hold their passports.
Yes. Yeah, so they hold all of their personal belongings, and so they can't get anywhere, they can't call anybody, all of that.
Also with the human trafficking, what we're seeing is a lot of the gangs have gotten so involved. You know, you can sell dope one time, but you can sell a girl over and over and over and over
Absolutely.
again. And so the gangs are so involved, and part of the problem with that is the girls won't testify against the pimps because they're gang members and they're afraid. And so the pimps therefore aren't getting prosecuted like they need to get prosecuted. And so it's this vicious cycle that
Actually, the class I took with Open Door, when the task force came, they showed us some videos, and they showed us a bust of the pimps. They had them all sitting on the curb, and they were all gang members.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
You would
And
never
again,
know. You would never know that person's a human trafficker if they were walking down the street by themselves. You would never know it.
Well, if you're out in Pomona and you see the guys on Holt Avenue on their bicycles,
That's them.
and a lot of them with backpacks, that's them. We see them when we're out there all the time.
In San Bernardino. That's how they go on their bikes, because that way they can watch the girls easier.
Shut the door, please.
One, they can get away.
Yep.
Too.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, that's a good observation and a good experience to share. So thank you. And we'll talk about why it's so, like, how humans we're reusable, right? Whereas it's a different type of product than, like you said, Kelly, than dope.
What's up?
Yep.
Um,
I'm in a work meeting, guys.
This is also another form of labor trafficking and something to keep an eye on. These postages of summer work, this is how much you'll get paid, call this number kind of thing. A lot of police officers were alerted that these people are actually traffickers that are trying to get young students, high schoolers to get excited about $17 an hour, but really they were kind of gonna be grooming them to be trafficked. And like people would call, like police officers would call, ask questions, and depending on the question they ask, they just hang up. So that's something to keep in mind. And so when we talk about human trafficking as an industry, it's a $150 billion industry and it keeps growing. And why is that? Why is it worth so much? And so what makes it so easy? So here is the segue into being humans, a person being reusable. And you're probably wondering why I have Chick-fil-A in the back of this slide, but supply and demand. So we all know that fast food is something that is not good for us, but it's here. And so wherever the demand is, there will be a supply. And also with fast food's cheap. It's easy to get some chicken. It's easy to get some fries. Just sell it for real cheap and you're on your way. But we all know it's not the best for us, right? And like the number one cause for death in America is heart disease, right? Coming from why we don't eat well here and all of that. But there's still this demand and there will always be this demand. And so when we think about human trafficking, that there is a demand. There is a demand for involuntary servitude. There is a demand for sex trafficking and all of that. And so obviously, like Kelly was talking about, there are gang members. There are just people who want to be involved in this. So they see a demand. They're going to be like, okay, great. I think I can totally finesse some things. I can manipulate some people to get me to make some money. And so globally, the cost of a human is only $90. And so when you think about $90 one time and you get that human for the rest of their life, that's a huge profit. And so that's why this business is so rich, is because humans are reusable. You don't have to, like Chick-fil-A is not reusable. You go and get, spend $10, you eat it, kind of thing. You have to go back, keep going back. But with humans, you get maybe like 5, you can make good money. And so that's the whole supply and demand. And then it's low risk and it's high profit, high return. So it's underground. And so like I was talking about earlier, thinking about families who do this, no one's around to kind of be a whistleblower. Like it's easy to hide. And it's underground because of all of the manipulation and all of you have to keep quiet or I'm going to hurt someone, I have your papers, just all of the force and coercion and fraud that goes into this keeps it very, very silent because these traffickers know how to tell someone to keep silent. And then lack of community awareness and resources. I think we've been great as a society lately, getting awareness out there, but there can also be a lot more we can do. And so I want to thank you guys for being here because just the more people know and the more people are aware, the more people will share and the more people will understand that it's an issue. Lack of law enforcement, lack of education within law enforcement also. But Pomona Police Department, I will say, are great. There is a set team, so that's a sexual exploitation and trafficking team that are specifically trauma informed and victim centered. And so whenever they respond to either prostitution or something like that, they're always trying to make sure, hey, are you okay? Is the victim okay? Not like, oh, he or she's choosing to be out here, it's a crime. It's very much like, okay, let's see what's going on. And so there are still law enforcement agencies that could be a little bit it could be a little bit better within the education of being trauma informed and victim centered. But I will say thumbs up with Pomona PD. And then victim blaming, that's another reason why it's low risk, is because people don't want to come forward because they're going to be like, people are just going to blame me for being in this. So what's the point of me coming forward? And then people just begin to be reliant. And like Kelly was saying, like, it's just a vicious cycle. People want to get out, but they don't, because one, someone's forcing them, someone's threatening them, or two, they're in this relationship with their trafficker and they believe they love their trafficker. And that's really, really hard to get out of. I mean, say you've been with this trafficker since you were 13, and you believe that you love them. And so it's a hard mindset to get out of.
The other part with that, Rebecca, is also that once they've been put out, the sense of shame and low self-worth is so drastic. And and they don't want their old life to know what they're doing now, and they don't know how to get out. And then the other thing is that what we're finding with the girls we're working with is their level of trust is next to none. And so even for people that want to help them, they don't trust even the people that want to help them. They want to know what it is you're trying to get out of them, what you're going to do to them, who you're going to tell, how much. I mean, it's so complex as far as psychologically, mentally, emotionally, that it's very difficult to get them to want to leave.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Kelly. And like I said at the beginning, like, this is just human trafficking 101. I mean, there's just so many factors, and there's so much psychological layers to pull back and to really understand a victim and survivor's mindset. Yeah, it's a big topic. It's a very big topic. It takes time to learn.
I was just going to add to that. Kelly and our team do such an amazing job of building trust with the clients that we serve.
I agree.
I think for all of us, I know everyone on the call is in some way probably serving victims or caring for or fighting trafficking. And I think we probably all agree that when we go into this work that we're doing, it's hard work, it's long work, it's going to take time. And we anticipate that if we're serving a client, we're serving a victim, they may enter the light, go back into the light multiple times. You know, they say up to 7, even more than that times. And so it takes so much patience to do this work, and it can be discouraging. But at the same time, I know all of us that are on this call probably have that tenacity to keep with it, because that is something that is so challenging. Because I think as a caregiver or as providing services, you think, oh, but I'm here, like, I'm going to rescue you, I'm going to make your life better, it's all going to be over. And that's we all know that isn't the case. So
no. Yeah. Thanks, Tamiko.
I think half the battle, at least from what I know and see, half the battle is relational in the beginning, and getting them to trust that you have some understanding, and that you are not judging them, and that you really are there just to try to help. And the other part of that for our own sanity is recognizing that we can't save anybody.
Right.
We can plant some seeds, and we can be there for them, but we ourselves are never going to be the one that saves anybody. And if they think we're trying to save them, they will run the other way fast. They'll run back to their trafficker faster if they think we're trying to save them.
Yeah, I think that's important, because these survivors just come with so much, and we can't think that we're going to make everything better in that one moment that we meet them, because we don't know everything that they went through, and there's no way we could understand everything in that one, or in that 3 days we're with them. I know I was with a survivor for 3 days and that's it. But those 3 days, getting to know the survivor and everything, and but she wasn't able to stick with it, which is fine. And that was kind of one of my first times of like, oh man, like this really sucks, but it's the reality of it. And we can just like hope that we did plant the seeds. So yeah, I think that's really important to highlight. And it's important to lean on your team also, and talk about that too. Because if I didn't have my team, man, I would be a sad gal. So yeah, lean on your team, your squad. And Erica says, and validating that we don't have all the resources to save them, but we can empower them to save themselves. For sure. Always putting the control back into their hands. Like, I don't want to do any, like, I want to be here and I want to be your support and be your resources, but I don't want to control this because everyone else in your life has controlled everything. But it's like, you own your life. And what do you want to do? I think that's great. Yeah, giving them that space, because, and like their whole lives probably for a long time, we're never given the chance to have space and to make a decision. And so it is weird a lot of the times, like for a survivor, to realize that, oh, I can make these decisions by myself, but then that's foreign to them also, because they've had a trafficker make their decisions maybe their whole life or since they were a teenager. And so maybe sometimes that those choosing those choices could be hard for them too. So yeah, just giving them space of not too many resources at one time. Yeah, it's a whole thing. We could talk about it for a long time. But yeah, thank you. Any other things pop up in our heads? Awesome. And so we'll move into what we can do. What can we actually do about this? And then everyone free will be going into next week, we'll be going into this a little bit more, but I'm just going to kind of scratch the surface. Just knowing the signs, honestly, is a way you can play a part. And these are a couple, I'll go over a couple of these. So the person does not speak for themselves. They are with someone that is older than them. The person may look a little bit more clean and well put together than, say, someone that looks younger than them. They don't speak English well, and the only words that they know are affiliated with sex or labor. That's a red flag. Signs of physical abuse. They're always closely monitored. They're always nervous. They're hypervigilant. They have a cell phone and nothing else. So they don't have their personal papers like their passport, driver's license, nothing. And they just have a cell phone that's only has like one number on it, right? And then suddenly has expensive things. This is common with youth, is they'll get into a relationship and they'll all of a sudden have all of these expensive things because someone is taking care of them, but it's really grooming them to being one of their victims. And then tattoos are common also, which is basically branding them that they belong to someone, they belong to their trafficker. So those are some signs to know and to just be aware of whenever you're out in the world. And then it's getting a little late, so we will skip this video. And then another thing, what can you do? You can educate and you can share. Take what you've learned here, share it with your friends and your family. If anything really interested you, go research it, go think about it a little bit more, research it a little bit more. And follow people on social media who are activists and share their posts and their videos. A21 is a great place to start. They are a global agency that is works overseas and here against human trafficking, and they post updates all the time, and they're pretty large. But you can follow us, you can follow just people who are involved in this movement and this work. You can also, this was pre-COVID, but like 3 years ago, we went to an Ontario walk against slavery, against human trafficking. I also use a lot of resources from Shared Hope International. Great. Thank you, Cassandra. Shared Hope International. I haven't heard of that, but thank you for that resource. I will look that up. And so just getting involved, getting into different movements, and there's a Walk for Freedom, and there's also local things that you can get involved with. You can walk around. This is a picture I took in like 2018, and we walked around Ontario, kind of just spread the word, and taking a picture of that, putting it on your social media, people start to ask what's going on, and that just creates more awareness, which is great. And then I also did this walk. That was really fun. That was in Hollywood. There were a ton of people, and they also gave you these bandanas with survivors' names on them. And so basically just kind of a metaphor, like we're walking and we're making this known because these people can't. And it's a good thing to do with your friends, and just spread the word. And then lastly, here are some resources. If you want to take a picture of these, and this project, Sister Family Services in Pomona, this is the actual hotline that you would call for resources and for crisis like intervention also. And then the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And you can always call that hotline if you just need advice, if you have questions, like if you're concerned about someone, it's anonymous. So yeah, and I'll leave that up for you guys. But it is 7:31. I did well. But I'm going to open it up if anyone has questions, if anyone has comments, thoughts, anything. This is the space. Bye, Tamiko. Thankful for you.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, Nora. And then next Thursday, Everyone Free will be, it's called Do One Thing. And so they will give you tangible things that you can do in order to combat trafficking. Thank you, Jacqueline. Have a good night. Oh, Marlena, can you share a little bit on your experience of recent viral videos being captures of possible human trafficking? Yes, so I've seen that. I've seen people go into random dollar stores or whatever, and they'll take pictures of people, and they'll literally be on the phone and be like, hey, come quick, something like that. But there was a viral video, I think today, that my students were actually talking about, and it was a TikTok, and it was supposedly a girl that was missing for a couple years, and they were trying to track her down and saying that she was being trafficked. I personally have not had any experience with something like that. I'm not sure if Kelly has any experience with viral videos and that being a part of a survivor story.
No, none of the girls have said anything about that. I mean, a lot of them have been videoed,
Yeah.
but they have not talked about it going viral, at least so far. So, yeah.
And my students were talking about, I'm not sure if you know anything about this, Kelly, but like there's a specific hand sign to like show that you're being trafficked. And I was like, I don't necessarily believe that, just because how are you going to put up a sign when you're with your trafficker?
Yeah, so there are supposedly some certain street there's some certain street language that's out there that they use. They walk on a certain part of the road, and different things, but we haven't been able to get all that just yet. So that's kind of on our radar to see if we can figure out, that while we're out there, when we're in the streets, to see if we can see what it is that they're doing. But I wouldn't be able to show it to you right now because I don't know enough about it yet.
Right. Yeah. And that's just hard because it's like, if we know about that, then the trafficker most likely knows about that sign or that specific behavior. And so that would be very hard to believe that something like that is happening, because I just don't see it being able to be okay with their trafficker. Like, if we know about it, they do too. So
yeah, I agree.
Anyone else have thoughts, questions? You're welcome, Jenny. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Vincy. Thank you, Cassandra. I'm going to stop recording now.
All right.